The sands of survival. The desert stretched like an endless sea of golden waves, unyielding and merciless, under the glare of a sun so intense it seemed to crush the horizon. The wind swept the dunes with a dry hiss, whispering secrets of ages long past. Dr. Ethan Vale, a xenobiologist, trudged through this barren expanse, his boots sinking into the scorching sands with each laborious step. His suit, equipped with state-of-the-art cooling technology, hummed faintly, shielding him from the worst of the inferno, but even it could not erase the oppressive heat entirely. This wasn't Earth, it was Cerathus 9, a planet infamous for its extreme climate. While its surface appeared desolate, rumors whispered of a hidden ecosystem thriving deep beneath the dunes. Ethan had come to confirm those rumors, driven by a relentless curiosity and the hope of uncovering something extraordinary. As he ascended yet another dune, his thoughts drifted to the mission that had brought him here. His team, stationed in orbit, had detected faint biosignatures on the planet's surface, an anomaly too intriguing to ignore. Ethan volunteered for the ground expedition, confident in his survival training and scientific expertise. But now he was alone. A sudden solar storm had forced his team to abort their descent, leaving Ethan stranded. Communication with the orbiting vessel was sporadic at best, and while they promised a rescue, it would take days. Ethan was undeterred. He had supplies, tools, and most importantly, a purpose. He paused atop the dune, scanning the horizon with his handheld bioscanner. The device, sleek and advanced, emitted a soft chime as it processed the environment. The screen displayed nothing, just the same barren wasteland he had seen for hours. Ethan sighed, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet. Then, a glint caught his eye. At first, he dismissed it as another mirage, a cruel trick of the desert heat. But the glint persisted, faint yet distinct against the monotony of the sands. Ethan adjusted his visor, activating the zoom function. The shimmer resolved into a figure, small, fragile, and utterly out of place in this lifeless expanse. His heart quickened. Without hesitation, Ethan descended the dune, his movements quick but cautious. As he approached, the figure became clearer. It was a woman, or at least something resembling one. Her skin shimmered faintly, a shade of iridescent lavender, cracked and dry, as though her body was breaking apart. Her limbs were unnaturally long and slender, her fingers tapering to delicate points. She lay sprawled in the sand, her chest rising and falling in shallow, labored breaths. Ethan knelt beside her, his shadow casting a protective veil over her fragile form. Up close, she was even more alien than he had imagined. Her face was a masterpiece of elegance, with sharp cheekbones and large, luminous eyes that flickered like dying embers. She was alive, but only just. He reached for his scanner, recalibrating it to analyze her biology. The readout was astonishing. Her physiology was unlike anything he had encountered before. Complex, delicate, and utterly incompatible with the environment. Her cells were breaking down, likely due to dehydration or some unknown stressor. The scanner beeped again, alerting Ethan to another anomaly. Her body contained traces of a compound, a unique organic nectar that seemed essential to her survival. But the reserves were almost depleted. Without it, her condition would deteriorate rapidly. Ethan's mind raced. He had limited resources and no prior knowledge of her species. Still, he wasn't about to give up. "You're going to be okay," he murmured, his voice muffled by his helmet. He doubted she understood him, but the words felt necessary. The alien's eyes fluttered open, locking onto his. Fear and confusion swirled in their depths, and Ethan felt an almost primal urge to reassure her. Slowly, he unclasped his helmet and removed it, exposing his face to the brutal heat. The sudden exposure made him wince, but he ignored the discomfort. "See, I'm not a threat," he said, his tone gentle. The alien flinched, her elongated fingers twitching weakly. Ethan hesitated, then reached for his canteen. Pouring a small amount of water into his palm, he extended it toward her. She recoiled, a faint hum escaping her lips, a sound layered with emotion, almost musical in its complexity. It wasn't a plea but a warning. Ethan frowned, pulling back his hand. The water evaporated unnaturally quickly, as if repelled by some unseen force. His gaze shifted to her cracked skin, the shimmering surface dull and lifeless. Understanding dawned. She didn't need water. Her biology relied on something entirely different. Setting the canteen aside, Ethan adjusted his scanner, this time using its advanced biological functions. The results were staggering. Her body could synthesize the life-sustaining nectar she needed, but the process required specific conditions. Those conditions, Ethan realized with a sinking feeling, might involve external help. The alien's eyes followed his movements, her gaze wary but less panicked. She seemed to sense his intentions, her hum softening into something almost pleading. Ethan retrieved a small device from his pack, a universal translator. Activating it, he placed it between them. "Can you understand me?" he asked, keeping his tone calm. The device whirred, struggling to process her melodic hums. Finally, it produced a single word. "Yes." Ethan blinked in surprise. "Good. My name is Ethan. What's yours?" The alien hesitated, her luminous eyes narrowing. She emitted another hum, and the translator interpreted, "Kayla." "Kayla," Ethan repeated, testing the name. "You're in bad shape, but I think I can help. Will you let me?" Kayla's gaze lingered on him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. Ethan exhaled, relief flooding through him. He wasn't sure how, but he would save her. For now, survival was their only goal. Together, they would face the unforgiving desert, their fates intertwined by the fragile thread of hope. A fragile trust. The sun had begun its slow descent, though the desert heat remained relentless, radiating off the sands in shimmering waves. Ethan could feel its oppressive weight bearing down on him, but his focus was entirely on Kayla. Every second mattered now. Her fragile body trembled faintly, the iridescent cracks along her skin deepening as her life force waned. Despite her weakened state, her luminous eyes stayed fixed on him, a mixture of fear and reluctant trust flickering within them. Ethan knelt in the sand, recalibrating his scanner to refine its analysis of her unique biology. His mind worked furiously, piecing together the fragments of information he had gathered. Kayla's body was designed to survive in conditions vastly different from Serathis IX's scorching desert. The organic nectar her cells required acted as both a sustenance and a regenerative compound. But without it, her internal systems were collapsing. He had to act fast, yet every step he took would be a gamble. "I don't know if you can understand all of this," Ethan said aloud, more to steady his own nerves than to communicate, "but I need to try something. It's risky, but it might work." Kayla's head tilted slightly, her expression unreadable. She emitted a faint melodic hum, and the translator buzzed to life, struggling to interpret her layered vocalizations. After a moment, it produced a fractured response. "Risk, must, trust." Ethan's chest tightened. The stakes were overwhelming. Not only was Kayla's life in his hands, but he also carried the responsibility of first contact with an alien species. This was a moment scientists dreamed of, yet it was fraught with peril and uncertainty. He retrieved a portable synthesizer from his pack, a device designed to analyze and replicate basic organic compounds. It was far from perfect and not originally intended for such complex applications, but it was his best shot. He keyed in the molecular structure of Kayla's nectar, using the data from his scanner to guide the process. The device hummed softly, its internal mechanisms working to replicate the life-saving compound. As the synthesizer worked, Ethan turned back to Kayla. "This will take a few minutes," he said, his voice calm but strained. "In the meantime, we need to keep you stable." Kayla's eyes flickered, her breathing shallow. Ethan reached into his pack and pulled out an emergency thermal blanket, spreading it over her slender frame to shield her from the biting cold that would inevitably come with the desert night. The violet hue of her skin contrasted sharply against the metallic silver of the blanket, a stark reminder of just how alien she was. Yet in her fragility, Ethan saw a reflection of the universal struggle for survival, a struggle that transcended species and worlds. "Stay with me," Ethan murmured as he monitored the synthesizer. Its progress was agonizingly slow, the device straining to replicate the intricate molecular structure of Kayla's nectar. He glanced at her again, noting the way her long, tapered fingers twitched weakly in the sand. Her eyes closed briefly, and panic surged through him. "Kayla," he called, his voice sharp. Her eyes fluttered open, the faint glow within them dim but present. She emitted another hum, softer this time, almost like a lullaby. The translator whirred and produced a single word: "Trying." Ethan's breath caught. The resilience in her tone, even translated imperfectly, was undeniable. She was fighting as hard as he was. Inspired, he doubled his efforts, fine-tuning the synthesizer to expedite the process. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the device emitted a soft chime, signaling success. Ethan held up a vial containing a small amount of translucent, golden liquid, the synthesized nectar. It glowed faintly, almost like liquid sunlight. He turned to Kayla, his heart pounding. "This is it. This might save you." Kayla's gaze shifted to the vial, her expression unreadable. Ethan hesitated. He had no way of knowing if the compound was an exact match or if her body would accept it, but there was no alternative. Carefully, he approached her, holding the vial in his gloved hand. "Kayla," he said softly, "I need you to trust me. This will help." She emitted another hum, the translator interpreting. "Trust. Hope." Slowly, she opened her mouth, revealing a series of small, delicate ridges that glistened faintly. Ethan leaned forward, his movements deliberate and gentle, and poured the nectar into her mouth. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a faint shimmer spread across her skin, the cracks beginning to mend as the nectar worked its way through her system. Kayla's breathing deepened, the shallow gasps replaced by steadier, stronger inhalations. Her luminous eyes brightened, and the faint glow of her skin began to return. Ethan exhaled in relief, sinking back onto his heels. "It's working," he whispered, more to himself than to her. Kayla's gaze met his, and for the first time, there was no fear in her eyes, only gratitude. She emitted a soft hum, and the translator buzzed. "Life. Given." "You're welcome," Ethan replied, a small smile breaking through the exhaustion etched on his face. As the desert winds began to pick up, carrying the promise of a cold night, Ethan knew their ordeal was far from over. They had survived the first hurdle, but the journey ahead would be fraught with challenges. The desert was unforgiving, and Kayla's recovery would take time. Yet for the first time since landing on Serapis 9, Ethan felt a spark of hope. Kayla's survival was not just a victory for science. It was a testament to the power of trust and determination. Together, human and alien would navigate the perils of this hostile world, their fates intertwined by the fragile thread of survival and the unyielding strength of their shared will. A bond forged in sand. The desert night descended swiftly, its cold bite a stark contrast to the searing heat of the day. The dunes, once glowing golden under the sun, now stretched like shadowy waves beneath a sky strewn with countless stars. Ethan huddled close to Kayla, their makeshift camp sheltered by a rocky outcropping that provided little more than a break from the relentless wind. The glow of Kayla's skin had returned faintly, illuminating the darkness with an otherworldly light, but her recovery was far from complete. Ethan wrapped his thermal blanket tighter around himself, the chill seeping through even his advanced suit. His eyes lingered on Kayla as she lay motionless, her elongated fingers twitching faintly. Every so often, she would hum, a soft, melodic sound that resonated through the night air. The translator interpreted fragments of her murmurs. Weak, safe, together. Her words, even fractured, carried a depth of meaning that Ethan found profoundly moving. Despite the vast chasm of difference between their species, there was a shared vulnerability, a shared need for survival. He had saved her, but now they were both at the mercy of the unforgiving desert. His supplies were limited, his mission in jeopardy, and rescue still days away. Yet, for the first time, Ethan didn't feel entirely alone. Kayla stirred, her luminous eyes fluttering open. They locked onto Ethan, her gaze softer now, less wary. She emitted a low hum, and the translator buzzed. Grateful, human. Ethan smiled faintly. It's Ethan, he corrected gently. Not just human. Kayla tilted her head, the subtle movement almost bird-like. Her hum deepened, and the translator interpreted, Ethan, savior. He shook his head. I'm just trying to help. We're in this together now. Kayla's gaze lingered on him, her luminous eyes searching his face. Then, slowly, she extended her hand, her slender fingers trembling. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then reached out, his gloved hand brushing hers. Her skin was cool to the touch, its texture smooth but subtly ridged, like polished stone. The gesture was simple yet profound, a silent acknowledgement of their bond. As the hours stretched on, Ethan worked to stabilize their position. Using what little energy remained in his pack's portable generator, he activated a small barrier field to shield them from the biting wind. He also rigged up a signal booster, hoping to re-establish communication with his orbiting team. The faint hum of the equipment was a welcome reprieve from the howling winds, though the booster emitted nothing but static. Kayla watched him intently, her glowing eyes following every movement. Despite her weakened state, she seemed curious, her head tilting slightly whenever Ethan adjusted the equipment. Finally, she emitted another hum, the translator struggling to keep up. What? Doing? Ethan paused, surprised by the question. Trying to call my team, he explained. They're up there, in orbit. He pointed toward the sky, where Sirius IX's twin moons hung like silver discs. They can get us out of here. Kayla's gaze followed his gesture, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she emitted another hum. Alone, no more. The simplicity of her words struck Ethan deeply. He nodded. Yeah. Alone, no more. As the night wore on, Kayla's condition continued to improve, though slowly. Ethan administered another dose of synthesized nectar, the golden liquid glowing faintly as it flowed into her system. Each time, the cracks in her skin mended further, the iridescent shimmer returning to her fragile form. She was healing, but Ethan knew they couldn't stay here indefinitely. The desert was vast, and while the outcropping provided temporary shelter, it was far from safe. We need to move tomorrow, Ethan said aloud, more to himself than to Kayla. Find better shelter, maybe even some resources. If the biosignatures we detected are real, there might be something out there. Plants, water, maybe even other life forms. Kayla tilted her head, her glowing eyes narrowing slightly. She emitted a soft hum, and the translator buzzed faintly. Danger, everywhere. I know, Ethan replied, his voice steady. But staying here isn't an option. We'll figure it out together. Kayla emitted another hum, softer this time, almost like a sigh. The translator struggled but managed a single word. Together. The bond between them was growing, forged by necessity, but deepened by mutual respect. Despite their differences, they were united in their fight to survive. Ethan felt a strange sense of responsibility toward Kayla, not just as a scientist, but as a fellow being. She was no longer just an alien life form. She was Kayla, a sentient, intelligent individual who had placed her trust in him. As dawn broke, painting the horizon in hues of crimson and gold, Ethan prepared to move. He packed their meager supplies, ensuring Kayla had another dose of nectar before carefully helping her to her feet. She wobbled slightly, her elongated limbs trembling, but she managed to stand. Her glow had returned fully now, casting a faint halo around her as the sunlight reflected off her iridescent skin. Ethan activated his scanner, searching for any sign of the biosignatures that had brought him to this desolate planet in the first place. The device emitted a soft chime, indicating a faint reading to the northwest. It wasn't much, but it was something. A direction, a goal. He turned to Kayla, offering his hand. "Ready?" Kayla hesitated for a moment, then placed her delicate fingers in his. The gesture was tentative but resolute. She emitted a soft hum, and the translator buzzed. "Ready, Ethan." Together, they set off across the dunes, their silhouettes small against the vast, unforgiving landscape. Each step was a challenge, the sand shifting beneath their feet, but they moved forward with determination. They were no longer just a stranded human and a dying alien. They were survivors, bound by a fragile but unyielding trust. As they disappeared into the horizon, the desert winds carried away the remnants of the night, their howls fading into a haunting melodic hum. The whispering caverns. The relentless sun had begun its ascent again, bathing the dunes in a golden glow that promised another day of searing heat. Ethan and Kayla trudged forward, their silhouettes small against the vast expanse of sand. Every step felt like a battle, as the dunes shifted beneath their weight, threatening to swallow them whole. The scanner in Ethan's hand emitted a faint rhythmic pulse, guiding them toward the faint biosignature he had detected earlier. It wasn't much to go on, but it was their only lead. Kayla moved with surprising resilience, her slender frame steadying with each passing hour. The nectar Ethan had synthesized seemed to be doing its job, gradually restoring her strength. Her luminous skin shimmered faintly under the harsh sunlight, the iridescent cracks along her arms almost entirely healed. Despite her weakened state, her movements carried an air of grace, her elongated limbs slicing through the air as if she were built for survival in ways Ethan could only begin to understand. "You're doing well," Ethan said, his voice steady but laced with exhaustion. He glanced at her, noting how her luminous eyes scanned the horizon with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "We're getting closer, I think." Kayla emitted a soft hum, her melodic voice rising and falling like a song carried on the desert wind. The translator buzzed faintly, struggling to keep up with the complexity of her speech. Finally, it managed the simple phrase, "Far, but hope." Ethan smiled faintly. "Yeah, hope. That's all we've got." As the sun climbed higher, the heat became almost unbearable. Ethan activated his suit's cooling system, feeling the faint hum of its mechanisms working to shield him from the worst of the temperature. Kayla, however, seemed unaffected, her physiology adapted to extremes in ways Ethan could only marvel at. Still, he noticed her gaze lingering on him, her luminous eyes narrowing slightly whenever he adjusted his suit's controls. "You're wondering how this works, aren't you?" Ethan asked, tapping the small console on his arm. Kayla tilted her head, her expression unreadable. She emitted another hum, the translator buzzing faintly before interpreting. "Machine. Protect." Ethan chuckled softly. "Something like that. It's not perfect, but it's kept me alive so far." Kayla nodded faintly, her gaze lingering on the console for a moment longer before shifting back to the horizon. They walked in silence for a while, the rhythmic crunch of their footsteps on the sand the only sound. Then the scanner emitted a sharp chime, its display lighting up with a stronger signal. Ethan stopped abruptly, his heart quickening. "We're close," he said, adjusting the scanner settings to refine the reading. The signal was coming from beneath the surface, faint but unmistakable. He turned to Kayla, his expression serious. "Whatever it is, it's underground." Kayla's eyes narrowed, her expression thoughtful. She emitted a low hum, and the translator buzzed. "Hidden. Beneath." "Yeah," Ethan agreed. "We'll need to find a way down." They scanned the area, searching for any sign of an entrance. The dunes stretched endlessly in every direction, but a jagged outcropping of rock to the east caught Ethan's attention. He gestured toward it, and Kayla nodded, her movements swift and deliberate as they made their way toward the formation. The outcropping rose like a jagged tooth from the sand, its dark surface pockmarked with fissures and crevices. Ethan scanned the area, his eyes narrowing as he spotted a narrow opening near the base of the rock. Sand had partially obscured the entrance, but it was clear enough to suggest a way down. "This looks promising," Ethan said, kneeling to inspect the opening. He brushed the sand away, revealing a faintly glowing residue along the edges of the rock. The substance shimmered in the sunlight, its color shifting between shades of blue and green. "What is this?" Kayla knelt beside him, her elongated fingers brushing the residue. She emitted a soft hum, the translator buzzing faintly. "Life. Traces." Ethan's eyes widened. "It's organic. This must be the source of the biosignature." Kayla nodded, her expression resolute. She gestured toward the opening, her luminous eyes meeting Ethan's. "Go, together." Ethan hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but we need to be careful." He activated his suit's built-in headlamp, the beam cutting through the darkness as they descended into the narrow passage. The air grew cooler as they moved deeper, the oppressive heat of the desert replaced by a damp, almost electric stillness. The walls of the tunnel glimmered faintly with the same residue they had found above, casting an otherworldly glow that illuminated their path. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a vast cavern. Ethan stopped in his tracks, his breath catching in his throat. The cavern was breathtaking, its walls covered in bioluminescent plants that pulsed with a rhythmic light, casting the space in shifting hues of green and blue. Pools of shimmering liquid dotted the ground, their surfaces rippling faintly as if alive. This is incredible," Ethan murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned to Kayla, who stood beside him, her luminous eyes wide with awe. "Is this your home?" Kayla emitted a hum, the translator buzzing faintly. "Not home, but life." Ethan nodded, his mind racing. The cavern was a treasure trove of life, a hidden oasis in the heart of the desert. But it wasn't just the beauty of the place that struck him. It was the realization that this could be the key to understanding Kayla's species and their connection to this planet. As they stepped deeper into the cavern, Ethan's scanner began to pick up faint readings of complex organic structures, unlike anything he had seen before. He approached one of the pools, kneeling to take a closer look. The liquid shimmered with an inner light, its surface alive with faint ripples that seemed to respond to his presence. "This must be the source of the nectar," Ethan said, glancing at Kayla. "Your body's designed to synthesize it, but this is where it comes from." Kayla nodded, her expression thoughtful. She knelt beside him, dipping her fingers into the liquid. The substance clung to her skin, shimmering as it interacted with her touch. She emitted a soft hum, and the translator buzzed. "Sustains life." Ethan's heart pounded as he realized the significance of their discovery. This cavern wasn't just a refuge, it was a lifeline, a sanctuary hidden beneath the desert's merciless surface. But even as he marveled at the beauty around them, a nagging sense of unease crept into his mind. They were not alone. The faint echo of movement in the cavern's depths sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. He exchanged a wary glance with Kayla, who had already tensed, her luminous eyes scanning the shadows. The peace of the cavern was fleeting, and the survival they had fought so hard for was about to be tested once again. Shadows in the cavern. The cavern's bioluminescent glow flickered faintly, casting shifting patterns of light and shadow across the expansive walls. Ethan and Kayla stood frozen, their senses heightened as the faint sound of movement echoed from the cavern's depths. It was subtle at first, a barely perceptible rustling, like wind through leaves, but there was no wind here. The air was heavy, humid, and filled with an unsettling stillness that made every sound feel magnified. Ethan tightened his grip on his scanner, recalibrating it to detect motion. The display lit up with faint readings, anomalous, scattered, and moving. Whatever was out there wasn't stationary. His pulse quickened. "We're not alone," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Kayla emitted a soft hum, her glowing eyes narrowing as she scanned the darkness. The translator buzzed faintly, producing fragments of her melodic vocalization. Aware, cautious. Ethan nodded, stepping closer to her. "Stay behind me," he said, though he doubted he was any better prepared for whatever was approaching. His equipment was designed for exploration, not combat, and while his suit provided some protection, it wouldn't hold up against a determined attack. The rustling grew louder, accompanied by faint clicks and guttural murmurs that sent a shiver down Ethan's spine. He activated his headlamp, the beam cutting through the shadows as he scanned the cavern. The light danced across the bioluminescent plants, their gentle glow interrupted by the movement of something larger. Then he saw it. Emerging from the darkness was a creature unlike anything Ethan had ever imagined. Its body was elongated and serpentine, its sleek, chitinous skin reflecting the faint glow of the cavern. Multiple limbs jutted from its sides, each ending in razor-sharp claws that clicked against the stone floor. Its head was adorned with a crown of spiny protrusions, and its eyes, 6 in total, glowed faintly, locking onto Ethan and Kayla with a predatory intensity. Ethan took a step back, his heart pounding. "Okay, not friendly," he muttered, his voice trembling. Kayla's hum deepened, the translator buzzing urgently. "Hunter. Dangerous." The creature let out a low, resonant growl, its segmented body undulating as it moved closer. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't outrun something like this, not in the uneven terrain of the cavern. Fighting was equally futile. He had no weapons and no idea how to defend himself against a creature so alien. Kayla, however, stepped forward. Ethan's breath caught as she raised her slender hands, emitting a series of melodic hums that resonated through the cavern. The sound was layered and complex, carrying an emotion Ethan couldn't quite place. The creature paused, its glowing eyes narrowing as it tilted its head, seemingly responding to Kayla's vocalization. "What are you doing?" Ethan hissed, his voice laced with panic. Kayla didn't respond directly. Instead, her hums grew louder, more deliberate. The translator struggled to keep up, producing fragmented interpretations. Calm, no harm, retreat. The creature hesitated, its movements slowing. It let out a series of guttural clicks, its posture shifting from aggressive to cautious. Ethan watched in disbelief as Kayla continued to hum, her melodic tones weaving through the cavern like a soothing song. The creature seemed to consider her sounds, its glowing eyes flickering as if processing her intent. Finally, with a low, guttural rumble, the creature retreated into the shadows, its segmented body disappearing into the depths of the cavern. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Ethan let out a shaky breath, his hands trembling as he lowered his scanner. What just happened? Kayla turned to him, her glowing eyes steady. She emitted a soft hum, and the translator buzzed. Communicated, intention. "You talk to it?" Ethan asked, incredulous. "How? What did you say?" Kayla tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. She emitted another hum, and the translator produced a fragmented response. "No threat. Peace." Ethan stared at her, his mind reeling. Kayla's ability to communicate with such an alien creature was nothing short of extraordinary. It was a skill born not just of survival, but of an innate connection to the ecosystem of this world. A connection Ethan could only begin to comprehend. "You're incredible," he said, his voice filled with awe. Kayla's eyes softened, her hum carrying a note of humility. The translator buzzed. "Together, survive." Ethan nodded, his respect for her deepening. They had faced danger and emerged unscathed, but he knew their challenges were far from over. The cavern was beautiful and life-sustaining, but it was also teeming with unknown threats. As they moved deeper into the cavern, guided by the faint glow of the bioluminescent plants, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The cavern's beauty was matched only by its eerie, otherworldly presence, a reminder that they were intruders in a world that didn't belong to them. They came upon another pool of shimmering liquid, larger and more vibrant than the first. Ethan knelt beside it, scanning its composition. The readings confirmed his earlier hypothesis. This was the source of the nectar Kayla's body required. The pool pulsed faintly, its glow shifting in rhythm with the bioluminescent plants on the walls. "This is it," Ethan said, turning to Kayla. "This can keep you alive." Kayla approached the pool, her movements graceful but cautious. She knelt beside it, dipping her fingers into the liquid. The nectar clung to her skin, shimmering as it absorbed into her body. She emitted a soft hum, the translator interpreting. "Life restored." Ethan smiled, relief washing over him. They had found what they needed, but as he looked around the cavern, he couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was far from over. The hunter may have retreated, but the cavern held secrets, some that could save them, and others that could destroy them. "We'll stay here for now," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But we need to be ready for whatever comes next." Kayla nodded, her luminous eyes meeting his. Together, they had faced danger and found hope in the heart of the desert. But the true test of their bond, and their survival, was yet to come. The heart of the cavern. The cavern seemed alive, its bioluminescent walls pulsating with a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. The air was dense, laden with the faint, sweet scent of the shimmering nectar pools scattered across the cavern floor. Ethan and Kayla had found temporary solace here, but the tension in the air was palpable, a reminder that their presence was an intrusion into a delicate ecosystem. Ethan sat near the largest of the pools, his scanner buzzing softly as it analyzed the environment. The data was both fascinating and overwhelming. The liquid in the pools wasn't just nectar. It was an intricate biochemical substance, teeming with microscopic life forms, each playing a role in maintaining the cavern's balance. This wasn't just a refuge. It was an interconnected network, a living organism in its own right. Kayla knelt beside him, her luminous eyes scanning the cavern with a mixture of curiosity and reverence. She dipped her slender fingers into the nectar, the liquid clinging to her skin and shimmering as it absorbed into her body. Her hums resonated softly through the air, carrying a melody that seemed to harmonize with the cavern's natural rhythm. "You're part of this place, aren't you?" Ethan asked, his voice tinged with awe. "This cavern, the nectar, it's all connected to your species." Kayla tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. She emitted a melodic hum, and the translator buzzed faintly. "Source. Home." Ethan's eyes widened. "This is where your people came from." Kayla nodded, her glowing eyes meeting his. She emitted another hum, the translator interpreting. "Life begins here." Ethan's mind raced. This wasn't just a discovery, it was a revelation. The cavern wasn't merely a shelter. It was a cradle of life, the birthplace of Kayla's species and perhaps others. He felt a profound respect for the place, a reverence that deepened with each passing moment. But that reverence was tempered by a growing sense of unease. The hunter they had encountered earlier wasn't an anomaly. It was part of this ecosystem, a predator maintaining the balance. And where there was one predator, there were likely others. As if on cue, the cavern's peaceful rhythm was interrupted by a low, resonant growl that echoed through the space. Ethan froze, his heart pounding as the sound reverberated off the walls. Kayla stiffened beside him, her luminous eyes narrowing as she scanned the shadows. "Not again," Ethan muttered, gripping his scanner tightly. He activated its motion detection mode, the display lighting up with multiple readings. Whatever was out there wasn't alone. Kayla emitted a series of melodic hums, her tone sharp and urgent. The translator buzzed. "Many. Approaching." Ethan's mind raced. The hunter had been terrifying enough, but the prospect of multiple creatures was overwhelming. They needed to move, and fast. He turned to Kayla, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. "We need to find a safer spot. Now." Kayla nodded, her movements swift and deliberate as she rose to her feet. She gestured toward a narrow passageway on the far side of the cavern, her hums conveying urgency. The translator interpreted. Deeper. Safe. Ethan didn't hesitate. He grabbed his pack and followed Kayla, their footsteps echoing through the cavern as they made their way toward the passage. The growls grew louder, accompanied by the faint clicking of claws on stone. Ethan glanced over his shoulder, catching a glimpse of multiple glowing eyes emerging from the shadows. "They're right behind us," he shouted, his voice echoing. Kayla turned briefly, her hums deepening into a commanding melody. The creatures hesitated, their movements slowing as if responding to her vocalizations. Ethan didn't waste the opportunity, quickening his pace as they entered the passage. The tunnel was narrow and winding, its walls glimmering faintly with the same bioluminescent residue that adorned the main cavern. The air grew cooler, the sweet scent of nectar giving way to a sharper mineral tang. They moved in near silence, the only sounds the faint hum of Kayla's voice and the rhythmic crunch of their footsteps. After what felt like an eternity, the passage opened into a smaller chamber. The space was dimly lit, the bioluminescent plants casting a soft, ethereal glow. In the center of the chamber stood a massive crystalline structure, its surface shimmering with the same iridescent hues as Kayla's skin. The sight took Ethan's breath away. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Kayla approached the structure, her movements reverent. She placed her hands on its surface, her luminous eyes closing as she emitted a series of melodic hums. The translator struggled to keep up, producing fragmented interpretations. Heart, source, protector. Ethan stepped closer, his scanner buzzing as it analyzed the structure. The readings were unlike anything he had ever seen. The crystal was alive, its molecular composition constantly shifting and resonating with the energy of the cavern. It wasn't just part of the ecosystem. It was the keystone, the element that held everything together. Kayla turned to him, her expression solemn. She emitted a soft hum, and the translator buzzed. "Guardian, danger." Ethan frowned. Danger? From what? Kayla gestured toward the passage they had just come through, her hums carrying a note of urgency. The translator interpreted. Protect. Balance. Realization dawned on Ethan. The creatures they had encountered weren't just predators. They were guardians, protecting the cavern and its heart from intruders. And now, Ethan and Kayla were intruders. "We're in their territory," he said, his voice steady. "We need to show them we're not a threat." Kayla nodded, her hums shifting into a softer, more melodic tone. She approached the entrance to the chamber, her voice resonating through the space like a song. The creatures appeared moments later, their glowing eyes watching intently. They didn't attack. Instead, they remained at the edge of the chamber, their postures cautious but not aggressive. Ethan's heart pounded as he watched Kayla communicate with them, her melodic hums weaving through the air like a delicate thread. The translator buzzed faintly, producing fragmented phrases. Peace, no harm, unity. The creatures seemed to understand. Their glowing eyes softened, and they retreated into the shadows, leaving Ethan and Kayla alone once more. Ethan let out a shaky breath, his respect for Kayla growing even deeper. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with awe. "You made them understand." Kayla turned to him, her luminous eyes steady. She emitted a soft hum, and the translator buzzed. Together, strong. Ethan nodded, his resolve strengthening. They had survived another trial, but their journey was far from over. The heart of the cavern held secrets beyond his comprehension, and the bond between human and alien would be tested in ways they could not yet imagine. Together, they would face whatever came next, united by a fragile but unbreakable trust.